Chapter 271, The Humiliation. Lin Feng looked in the same direction as the other people and saw Bing Yuan. What a cold young man. In the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, only possessors of ice and snow spirits were accepted. All the skills they practiced were ice skills. When that group of people arrived, it seemed like the atmosphere had suddenly become much colder. Ninth Ling Chi layer, said Ba Dao. Lin Feng faintly nodded. The fact that the Yunhai sect had been annihilated wasn't a random and groundless event. 1 year before, the Yunhai sect was, indeed, the weakest of all the largest sections. It was obvious when seeing the disciples of the other sects. Bing Yuan and his friends were walking forwards. At that moment, many people were moving aside, opening a path for them. Very quickly, Bing Yuan arrived in front of Lin Feng, but the crowd noticed that Lin Feng wasn't moving aside. He was standing in the same place he was before, motionless. Ha! Many people were stupefied. Who were these audacious people? They saw that Bing Yuan and his friends wanted to pass, but these people were making them go around them. Bing Yuan frowned and some ice-cold chi moved towards Lin Feng and the two others. The atmosphere around them was surrounded by a layer of white frost. Very quickly, Lin Feng's body was surrounded by a layer of ice. Lin Feng was still standing at his initial position, looking calm and serene. An invisible strength appeared. Lin Feng's clothes were fluttering in the air. In a flash, the ice around his body completely vanished without trace, as if there hadn't been anything at all. What's going on? The crowd was astonished. In the blink of an eye, the ice around Lin Feng's body had disappeared. It seems like that person is extremely strong. No wonder that he isn't moving even though Bing Yuan is trying to pass, thought many people at that moment. They were starting to pay attention to Lin Feng. He seemed quite mysterious. I'm Bing Yuan of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village. Who are you? Asked Bing Yuan to Lin Feng, sounding extremely cold. Frost was floating around his body. Lin Feng, said Lin Feng indifferently. Surprisingly, when Bing Yuan heard his name, his pupils shrank. He had heard that name many times in his sect. The elders of the sect often talked about him. Half a year before, he had set a city on fire and was famous in the imperial city for all his actions. Strong cultivators who belonged to the largest sects obviously knew who he was. Lin Feng, I've never heard that name. I don't know which sect he belongs to, thought people in the crowd. They were puzzled. They didn't know which sect had an outstanding disciple called Lin Feng. But from Bing Yuan's facial expression, they had the impression that he knew Lin Feng. He was frowning. Then, Bing Yuan walked around Lin Feng. People who were with him angrily glared at Lin Feng. They were asking themselves why Bing Yuan hadn't killed him. He surprisingly dared to act so arrogantly before them. But Bing Yuan remained silent. His friends had no choice but to follow him and ignore Lin Feng. At that moment, a strong ice energy flew through the air towards Lin Feng's body. Lin Feng smiled coldly and slightly shook his hand. Ah, at that moment, a horrible shriek filled the atmosphere. It came from the disciple who had just attacked Lin Feng by surprise. The arm he had used for the attack was hanging from his shoulder by a layer of skin, and cultivation had just been crippled. All the disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village turned around and looked at Lin Feng with ice-cold glares. Brother, what's going on? He attacked me by surprise, said the disciple whose face was deathly pale. He was fixedly staring at Lin Feng. Attacked by surprise? Lin Feng took a step forward and released swift and fierce chi. It invaded the entire atmosphere. That person started shaking and then groaned. He was terrified. He was staring at Lin Feng and blood started flowing from his mouth. You dared kill me, said that person with a trembling voice. Immediately after, his facial muscles relaxed and he collapsed onto the person who was behind him. He had just died, yet his eyes remained open with a shocked expression. Lin Feng had just killed him in front of the group of disciples. They would have never thought he would be so daring. The crowd was astonished, dumbstruck, and fixedly staring at Lin Feng. How audacious! He had killed the disciple in front of all his fellow disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, including Bing Yuan. As if I needed to attack you by surprise, said Lin Feng, sounding indifferent. That guy had just said that Lin Feng had attacked him by surprise. Lin Feng didn't feel like wasting words, so he immediately killed him. Lin Feng was much stronger than him and was not scared of the disciples. He had dared to kill him immediately while they all watched. Had Lin Feng needed to attack him by surprise? The other guy obviously just wanted to slander Lin Feng. People in the crowd were indiscernibly nodding. Indeed, with Lin Feng's strength and courage, it was impossible for him to have attacked that guy by surprise. The disciple was just lying. Lin Feng looked indifferently at the disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, and more precisely at Bing Yuan. What did they intend to do? Bing Yuan looked glum. Even though he knew that his fellow disciple had provoked Lin Feng first, Lin Feng had killed him in front of everybody else. That was a humiliation for Bing Yuan and for the Ice and the Snow Mountain Village as well. Lin Feng, it seems like you don't care about humiliating me, said Bing Yuan while releasing some cold energy. The crowd was stupefied. Did he want to fight? Why would I care about humiliating you, replied Lin Feng, sounding cold. Since you know me, you also know my background. Now, why would I need to care about humiliating you or even your entire sect? Bing Yuan was surprised. Indeed, Lin Feng was a disciple of the Yunhai sect. The Ice and Snow Mountain Village had also contributed to the destruction of the Yunhai sect. Its patriarch, Han Shuitian, had even personally gone there to participate. Did Lin Feng need to give him face? It seems like Bing Yuan knows Lin Feng. It's just that we don't know him. We have to remember that name, thought the people in the crowd. Lin Feng surprisingly dared contradict Bing Yuan. It meant that he was probably extraordinarily strong, yet they had never heard his name. That was very strange. Bing Yuan, brother, kill him. Yes, brother, he killed our fellow disciple, kill him. Each and every single disciple of the Ice and Snow Village Mountain was furious. Lin Feng was too audacious. He had killed their fellow disciple and was still acting arrogantly. They were furious and wanted to kill him. Kill me? Are you not done talking shit? Said Lin Feng while glancing at the disciple. Lin Feng was provoking them to try and kill him. He was extremely aggressive. He was inviting these people to attack him and see the results. Their facial expressions were hideous. They didn't dare attack him though. Lin Feng had just slightly moved his hand and killed their fellow disciple. Besides, Bing Yuan seemed hesitant. That person was extremely strong. They could only try to convince Bing Yuan to attack, but Bing Yuan did not dare attack either. Lin Feng's power is unfathomable. He has broken through to the 7th Ling Chi layer already, and that was over half a year ago. He's probably much stronger now, thought Bing Yuan while staring at Lin Feng. He then thought, besides, I came to Celestial River for a reason and it has nothing to do with Lin Feng. The most important thing is for me to buy the thing I need. When Bing Yuan thought about the situation, he suddenly felt relieved. He had to stay in his peak condition because he had even more important things to do. In comparison with he had to do, the death of his comrade was meaningless. Let's go, said Bing Yuan as he started leaving. That move made everyone stupefied. Let's go? Bing Yuan surprisingly left. Was he scared to fight against Lin Feng? The disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village were even more surprised. Bing Yuan wasn't fighting? Their deceased fellow disciple wasn't going to be avenged? Let's go, said Bing Yuan extremely coldly, which made them shiver. Immediately after, they glared at Lin Feng again yet left. They didn't dare contradict Bing Yuan. In the mountain village, Bing Yuan was extremely powerful and aggressive. Those who dared oppose him were punished. That time, they didn't know why he wasn't avenging his fellow disciple. Was he afraid of Lin Feng? Lin Feng looked at them leave. He looked calm and serene. Immediately after, he continued walking around the dream pavilion. A moment later, he arrived in front of an old man's rug that was selling pill ingredients and squatted down. Old man, how much is that spiritual lichen? Asked Lin Feng to the old man. The old man raised his head, looked at Lin Feng and said, 1 purity stone of lower quality per stem. Help yourself. I would like 100,000 stems, said Lin Feng. The old man was astonished and was blankly staring at Lin Feng. 100,000 stems, even though spiritual lichen wasn't extremely valuable, 100,000 was a huge number. Why do you need so much lichen? To concoct some spiritual sanguine pills. Spiritual sanguine pills? What other ingredients do you need? Lin Feng's pupils shrank. He knew that he had found the right person. I am making pure earth pills, spirit breath pills and red sun pills. When the old man heard Lin Feng, he remained silent for a second. Lights were flashing in his eyes. He then said, wonderful, then you need some scorching heat herb, sanguine plants, and pure qi grains. Indeed. I need a lot of ingredients, said Lin Feng while nodding. While walking around, Lin Feng was observing the vendors and their strength. That old man's strength was unfathomable. Ba Dao hadn't been able to tell. Therefore, they had come to him. It seemed like he was an extremely powerful cultivator who, on top of that, could also concoct pills. Chapter 272, The Recipe. The old man smiled and looked at Lin Feng. It seems like you came prepared, but did you already know that I had these things? Old man, I didn't know, but a cultivator of the Xian Qi layer selling pill ingredients here is always something easily noticeable, said Lin Feng with a warm smile. The old man smiled and shook his head. Don't call me old man, you can call me Mr. Hua. That girl behind you is just as enigmatic. Mr. Hua, said Lin Feng, getting more intimate with the old man. He then continued, Mr. Hua, I just told you what I needed and I need huge quantities. Do you know where I can find such large quantities? If small quantities are enough for you, I can help you, but if you need hundreds of thousands, I have no solution for you. The old man was shaking his head. Hundreds of thousands, that was a huge quantity. Who was able to depict that many plants? But you asked me where you could find them. There is a place, but you cannot go there. Cannot go there? Lin Feng was stupefied and asked, if I ask you to help me, will it still be difficult? The old man frowned and looked at Lin Feng. Hundreds of thousands is a colossal quantity. I'm not sure I can get that much. Besides, if you need hundreds of thousands of each of the herbs and plant, even though they are not valuable, it is still a tremendous amount. Do you know of spirit blood pills? Asked Lin Feng. The old man was stupefied. A strong qi emerged from his body. That abrupt rise of qi made Lin Feng feel an incredible heat as if he was going to burn alive. The old man probably was an expert at using fire. People who were experts at using fire had high proficiency in concocting pills and fabricating weapons. Of course, the soul also had to be extremely strong. What do you know about spirit blood pills? Asked the old man. I know about them. Spirit blood pills can alter the blood vessels and the soul, making a cultivator's blood vessels and soul become extremely strong. They are extremely beneficial for cultivators of the Xian Qi layer. It's a Xian level pill of medium quality, said Lin Feng slowly. The classification of pills was similar to that of weapons, which also depended on the different cultivation levels. After ordinary weapons, there were spiritual weapons and then mystical weapons. Besides, there were ordinary pills which were suitable for cultivators of Qi layer but who were of almost no use for cultivators of the Ling Qi layer. Only Ling level pills had effect on cultivators of the Ling Qi layer but were of almost no use to cultivators of the Xian Qi layer. Cultivators of the Xian Qi layer required spiritual weapons as well as Xian level pills. The Spirit Blood Pill was a Xian level pill of average quality which was extremely beneficial to cultivators of the Xian Qi layer, even if they had broken through to the 6th Xian Qi layer. Weapons and pills were also classified according to their quality, high, average and low quality. Using Xian level pills of average quality on a cultivator who was under the 4th Xian Qi layer would have been a waste. Even though the pills were still beneficial to them, their bodies weren't able to entirely assimilate them. Then, if used on a cultivator above the 6th Ling Qi layer, these pills had almost no effect. Therefore, they were adequate for cultivators between the 4th and the 6th Qi layer. How could the old man not be surprised when he heard that Lin Feng wanted some Xian level pills of average quality? Can you concoct them? Asked Mr. Huo while staring at Lin Feng. At that moment, Mr. Huo didn't look sluggish anymore, he looked captivated. How could I concoct that kind of high-quality pills, said Lin Feng while shaking, which made the old man frown. But Lin Feng continued, but accidentally, I obtained the recipe of the spirit blood pills. The recipe, the old man was surprised and started breathing faster. There were 3 difficult things about pills, being able to or finding someone to concoct the pills, finding the material to concoct the pills and then obtaining the recipe. Besides, the recipe was the most important thing, without it, it was impossible to concoct the pills. Of course, many people thought that the one who concocted the pills was the most important because it was very difficult to find good ones. But without the recipe, how could anyone concoct the pills? However, with the recipe, even without someone to concoct the pill, at least, the recipe was already extremely valuable. Indeed. The recipe, Mr. Hua. I just talked about a few pills, I need to make at least 20,000 of each. What materials do I need? Master Hua probably knows better than me. If you can help me, I will offer you the recipe of the spirit blood pill. Lin Feng had said 20,000, which represented a huge quantity. It was the first time that Mr. Hua heard a person say that they needed 20,000 pills. Then don't worry, I understand, said Mr. Hua while staring at Lin Feng. Mr. Hua, if you kill me, you will not obtain the recipe. Besides, you might not necessarily be able to kill me. I am convinced that Mr. Hua wouldn't try such a thing anyway, said Lin Feng while smiling. Mr. Hua remained silent, looking pensive. Alright, deal, but I need a few days. Alright, no problem. 3 days later, at dinner time, I will be at the Celestial Mountain restaurant waiting for you. How does that sound? Alright, see you in 3 days, said Mr. Hua while rolling up his sleeves. In a flash, the herbs on the ground vanished. He obviously had a Na stone. Mr. Hua turned around and immediately left the dream pavilion. It seemed like the old man could handle things for Lin Feng at the speed of light. When Lin Feng saw Mr. Hua leave, he smiled. Lin Feng's plan had worked without any incident. Concerning the recipe of the pill, it wasn't going to be a loss for Lin Feng, it was in the memories which the cultivator of the Zun Qi layer had given to him, he just had to write it down on a piece of paper and hand it over. Lin Feng wasn't going to lose anything in the transaction. Let's go. Lin Feng started walking again, going towards the depths of the dream pavilion. They weren't the only people in that case, at that moment, they were surrounded by a myriad of people who were walking in the same direction, including the vendors who were packing up their things. The auction sales will start in about half an hour. Do you know if the moon-breaking blade will be sold today or not? Lin Feng respectfully asked someone walking over to their group. That person had seen Lin Feng kill the disciple of the Ice and Snow Mountain village, and then ignore Bing Yuan. They had also heard Lin Feng talk about Xian-level pills with Mr. Hua. That timid person couldn't believe his ears. Besides Lin Feng, who was also extremely strong, the man wearing a bronze mask, who was following him, was probably just a subordinate. Leave. Forget everything that you have seen and heard today, said Lin Feng, sounding cold and detached. That person then timidly nodded and said, understood. After that, that person left feeling aggrieved. Lin Feng ignored him and moved towards the entrance of the auction. Then, Lin Feng said to the 2 people at the entrance, I have things to sell at auction, with whom should I talk? Come with me, said one person. Lin Feng followed him and entered the auction room. After a short time, they arrived in a room where people were sorting various goods. When Lin Feng saw all these goods, he was stupefied. There was an incredible quantity of goods that people wanted to sell at auction. The person who received Lin Feng was a very sexy woman. Her skin was as white as snow, her shoulders were beautiful and well-formed, she had well-developed white breasts. She was extremely attractive. What do you want to sell, sir? A D-level skill of low quality called Swift Leaf as well as 10 spiritual weapons of medium quality, said Lin Feng, sounding cold and detached. The sexy woman was stupefied, the smile on her face suddenly turned into a deep and profound facial expression. Sir, please come with me, said the woman while standing up. You can wait here for a moment, said Lin Feng to Meng Qing and Ba Dao. Immediately after, he entered in a secret room with the woman. In that room, things were in complete disorder, it definitely required some tidying. These goods were the ones which had been selected to be sold at auction. Sir, show me the things which you would like to sell at auction, said the woman who had arrived by an old man's side. All right. The Swift Leaf book appeared in Lin Feng's hand. At the same time, above the ground, a small light flashed and suddenly, 10 spiritual weapons appeared, and a resplendent light emerged. Lin Feng handed over the Swift Leaf skill to his interlocutor. The woman gave to the old man, who looked through it. Immediately after, the old man nodded and said, no problem. It's a medium quality skill of the D level. There is no problem with the spiritual weapons either. Thank you, senior. The woman smiled and packed the skill and the weapons. She then sealed the box for safekeeping. She then wrote a few notes on the package and handed a small jade card over to Lin Feng. Sir, your things will be sold tomorrow. After the auction, you only need to come back with jade card and we will know what items belong to you. The fortune won't be small and you will receive all your purity stones without a fee. Besides, using that card, you can enter the area reserved to our special clients, said the beautiful woman with an enchanting smile on her face. While talking, the way she was moving her body made her look even more seducing. No fees and sold tomorrow, thought Lin Feng. The normal procedure was supposed to last 3 days, but because Lin Feng's goods were extremely valuable, he had gained some privileges. Concerning the reward, Lin Feng thought that he had already had plenty of fortune. The memories of the strong cultivator were his most valuable possession. Lin Feng nodded and left the room. Chapter 273, Provocations. In the area reserved for special clients, Lin Feng and Meng Qing were sitting on soft chairs while Ba Dao was standing behind them. From the inside of their booth and behind the special curtains, they could clearly see the entire huge auction room. At that moment, a delicate silhouette suddenly appeared at the very front. That was precisely the woman that had received Lin Feng before. At that moment, she had already changed her clothes and was wearing a long blue cheongsam which was drifting over the floor. Her shoulders weren't covered and her dress also had a low-cut neckline. Lin Feng was feeling a strange sensation. A light flashed in Meng Qing's eyes, who then glared at Lin Feng. As if Lin Feng had sensed it, he turned his head and briefly looked at Meng Qing. Lin Feng couldn't help but smile while his lips were slightly shaking. At that moment, in the area reserved to special guests, there was an ordinary young man who looked ice cold like a blade. Then, a group of people, looking solemn and respectful, were standing behind him. Lan Jiao is more and more alluring each day, said Lang Yu indifferently. Lang Yu, if you like Lan Jiao, she will not refuse, flattered someone standing behind him. Lang Yu, looking evil, said, well, if she's too obedient, what's the point? I like to cut them by force. When the 4 others heard him, they looked at each other. The Blade Master was a monstrously aggressive and sly person. He didn't care about knowing if the person was willing or not, he enjoyed using his blade to abuse women. The 4 others would never have thought that he had a tendency like that, he surprisingly liked to cut them. It's not that easy to come to Celestial River, I want the blade but I also want a few women, said Lang Yu sounding indifferent. The 4 others were surprised. It seemed like Lan Jiao wouldn't be able to escape from him. Why did she have to have such an alluring body and, on top of that, why was she revealing so much of it? It certainly made men drool. On that day, the auction was normal, there were 10 items. Lin Feng wasn't interested in the things which were being displayed at that moment. He was just sitting there and watching. However, at the moment when Lan Jiao displayed the 8th item, Lin Feng started to be interested. It was a Ling-level spiritual weapon of higher quality, its price was 1,000 purity stones of medium quality. On that day, many people had come for the moonbreaking blade. It had just been introduced that its price had already been raised to 2,000, which exceeded many people's budgets already. Spiritual weapons of higher quality were precious, but 2,000 purity stones was very expensive. 3,000 purity stones of medium quality. At that moment, a voice, which was as sharp as a blade, emerged in the atmosphere. Some blade energy also spread in the atmosphere and enveloped the crowd in the auction room for a few seconds. Many people were surprised, they turned around and looked at the reserved area. A single person was releasing all that blade energy. It's the Blade Master, thought the crowd. That blade energy had probably been released by the Blade Master. People knew that he had come to Celestial River. Surprisingly, he was releasing his blade energy across the crowd, how aggressive. But the Blade Master was stronger and more gifted than them. Besides, he was a disciple of the Hao Yu sect. He could afford to be that aggressive. He was a bit more vigilant in front of a cultivator of the Xian Qi layer, but facing people of lower levels didn't scare him at all. After he released Blade Qi, obviously, the entire atmosphere became silent. 3,001 purity stones of medium quality. At that moment, someone sounding cold and detached spoke, breaking the silence. That voice also came from the area for special guests. Besides, that person wasn't far from the Blade Master, only one booth was separated them. Ha! Lang Yu was surprised and immediately said coldly, 4,000. 4,001, said the other voice sounding cold. Progressively, Lang Yu's facial expression was changing. He suddenly released much more blade energy towards that person. Blade Master, what does this mean? The auction room is supposed to be a fair and quiet place, what are you doing, said a cold voice sounding ice cold and aggressive while blocking the blade energy. Disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village. The crowd was surprised, these were people of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village and surprisingly someone dared provoke the Blade Master, only one person could do that. Bing Yuan, shouted the Blade Master and continued, 5,000. 5,001. 8,000, that time, Lang Yu immediately increased to 8,000, at the same time, he released an incredible quantity of blade force which made the ground shake. The crowd was stupefied, the Blade Master was wealthy. That price was already very high. Since Brother Lang Yu likes it that much, I give up. Lang Yu smiled indifferently. Ice-cold energy invaded the atmosphere like a hurricane, white frost emerged as well and explosion sounds. The booth separating these two people exploded and 3 silhouettes were revealed. A man and a woman were sitting there and a man with a bronze mask was standing behind them. Well, thank you, Bing Yuan, for leaving the moonbreaking blade for me, said the Blade Master sound egocentric. He didn't even pay attention to Lin Feng and the two others in the middle. The crowd was looking at Lin Feng, the two others. They were secretly shaking their heads. Lin Feng and the two others had unluckily ended up in a booth between Bing Yuan and the Blade Master. They were going to receive the collateral damage. Lan Zhao, say it, said the Blade Master while looking at the stage. Lan Zhao looked at the booth which had just exploded and smiled while slightly nodding. She was about to say something when Lin Feng said, 8001. Everybody was surprised when they heard Lin Feng. He was surprisingly bidding. He's been angered? Maybe he lost his sanity because of the explosion. It seems like they've run out of luck. Many people came up with the same idea, but those who had seen Lin Feng and Bing Yuan didn't think that was the case. Not only had Lin Feng provoked Bing Yuan, but he was also provoking the Blade Master, Long Yu. When Long Yu heard Lin Feng, he was stupefied. Apart from Bing Yuan, there was someone else who was trying to anger him. The Blade Master slightly closed his eyes and concentrated to find out who had said that. He then immediately found out. Then, he opened his eyes again and a cold smile appeared on his face. It seems like the warning I gave you with my blade in the restaurant wasn't enough, said Long Yu coldly. Immediately after, he said, 9,000 purity stones of medium quality. 9,001, said Lin Feng hastily almost at the same time as Long Yu finished speaking. The scariest was that Lin Feng sounded calm. He didn't sound nervous at all, as if he didn't care about the Blade Master getting angry. You want to die, said Long Yu while standing up. An incredible blade energy rolled in the air emitting explosive sounds. At that moment, Long Yu launched himself through the curtains in front of him and appeared in front of the crowd. At that moment, he and Lin Feng were only separated by a small partition. They just had to make a small step forwards and they would be able to see each other. Ba Dao's silhouette flickered and moved to the front. His agility was insane. In a flash, an incredible amount of blade force invaded the atmosphere. In the air, an explosion sound emerged when the two blade forces collided. He stopped bidding and is making a spectacle of himself. The Blade Master should be renamed the Shameless Master, joked Lin Feng. How could he be so daring as to make fun of Long Yu in front of everybody? 12,000 purity stones of medium quality, said Long Yu while gnashing his teeth. He had bid again because Lin Feng had joked about the fact that he had stopped bidding. As expected, people of the Haiyu sect have so many purity stones, said Lin Feng while laughing and then continued, that spiritual weapon is now too expensive for me. He should die. He did that on purpose. That guy is interesting, he surprisingly dares to provoke the Blade Master, tricking him into spending more purity stones for the moonbreaking blade. When the crowd heard Lin Feng, they were stupefied. That was extremely audacious. Lang Yu and the four people behind him looked ice cold. Ha ha. Brother, you're right, it seems like the Haiyu sect has too many purity stones, said Bing Yuan in the tone of a joke. He sounded overjoyed to pour oil onto the flames. Besides, Lang Yu would hate Lin Feng even more if they fought. That would be interesting. But Lin Feng smiled coldly, his lips vibrated and he replied extremely coldly, who are you calling your brother? The people of the Haiyu sect are just like you are all shameless and have to do things in the shadows, because you don't dare let your real intentions show. You are all shameless cowards. When Lin Feng finished talking, the crowd was, once again, astonished. Not only was Lin Feng provoking the Blade Master, but he was provoking Bing Yuan. He was fearlessly humiliating them. Chapter 274, The Ancient Cauldron. Bing Yuan's smile became stiff and then an exploding sound emerged in the atmosphere. The three rooms were united. Its occupants could all clearly see each other. At that moment, the main representative of the Ice and Snow Mountain village was Bing Yuan, and for the Haiyu sect it was Lin Yu the Blade Master. Besides them, there were three more people, one of them was standing before the booth, the two others were a man and a woman. They were both calmly sitting on their chairs, ignoring the others. They had not moved a single finger so far and were just talking. Besides, that girl was wearing a fine veil on her face, looking fascinatingly beautiful. Bing Yuan, are you laughing at me? Lin Yu said in the tone of a joke. Bing Yuan had been provoking him all the way. He wanted Lin Feng and him to fight, but the result was that Lin Feng humiliated them both. Humph. Bing Yuan was glumly smiling. He had already given Lin Feng face, but Lin Feng, the first time, killed his fellow disciple and humiliated him, the second time, he was humiliating him again. Brother, Long Yu, how should we dispose of him? You decide. Bing Yuan said, sounding evil, getting ready to attack Lin Feng. Who's your brother? He's right. People of the Ice and Snow Mountain village are all cowards. What makes you think that we can become brothers, said Long Yu. Bing Yuan was dumbstruck. He had the impression that the whole crowd was staring at him and that he was suffocating from the humiliation. The oxygen seemed unable to reach his lungs anymore and he felt like he couldn't breathe. A great quantity of cold energy spread through the air. The entire auction room seemed like it was going to freeze. Gentlemen, now please let the auction continue. You can solve your problems after the auction, said Lan Zhao from the stage. Her smile was soft and warm just like the sound of her voice, which suddenly made the atmosphere feel a bit lighter. All right, said Bing Yuan looking ice cold. Lin Feng nodded at Lan Zhao and smiled back to her out of politeness. Now, Lang Yu has bid 12,000 purity stones of medium quality, is anyone willing to raise, said Lan Zhao while smiling at the crowd. Nobody was answering. 12,000 for a spiritual weapon of that quality was already too expensive. In order to practice cultivation, even for a cultivator of the Qian-Qi layer, so many purity stones of medium quality would have been enough to practice indefinitely. If there is nobody, I would like to congratulate the Blade Master on his new acquisition, the Moonbreaking Blade. Lan Jiao smiled and continued, the next object of our auction sales is an ancient cauldron. On the cauldron 9 dragons are carved. This cauldron is hundreds of thousands of years old. It must have been used to concoct pills and weapons in ancient times, but it seems that some parts are now missing. We cannot find out its level, but the expert of our company, the Dream Pavilion, said that if no part was missing, it would be at least a Qian-level cauldron of high quality, a real treasure. For everybody to understand clearly what parts are missing, we will show you the cauldron. When Lan Jiao finished talking, 2 people brought a cauldron. That cauldron was about 1 meter high. Its diameter was also about 1 meter. On the top, there were 9 dragon carvings. They almost looked alive. Besides, there was one dragon which was looking up at the sky and uttering a long cry. It seemed like it was about to fly away. However, the 8 other dragons seemed to be incomplete and did not look like the first dragon, as if that was the part that Lan Jiao had mentioned. Besides, from a certain distance, that cauldron seemed to be absolutely normal and its carvings seemed to be releasing a strange qi. I hope that you can trust our experts at the Dream Pavilion. This cauldron has some missing parts, yet it shouldn't be inferior to a Ling-level cauldron of higher quality. You can already use it to concoct pills. If it were intact, it would definitely be a treasure of the Qian level. Even when mentioning these characteristics, it wouldn't be enough for the crowd to be interested. In Celestial River, we always have some antiquities which have missing parts. We are honest about it. However, it would still be classed as Ling level of higher quality. Besides, it can also be used to defend from attacks. Perhaps there were some cultivators who could concoct pills who would be interested. The price is 1,000 purity stones of medium quality, said Lan Jiao. Immediately after, people in the crowd shook their heads. 1,000 for a broken cauldron was too expensive and unworthy. When Lan Jiao saw that the crowd was shaking their heads, she smiled wryly. She knew that selling that precious cauldron wouldn't be easy. It was difficult to get a good price for it, but it was really a priceless treasure. I will buy it for 1,000 purity stones of medium quality, said someone at that moment. That person was an old man. He could obviously concoct pills. Even though that cauldron was of no use, the old man was still interested in these kinds of mysterious treasures. Besides, as far as he was concerned, 1,000 purity stones of medium quality wasn't a big sum. Since the old man said so, just give it to him, somebody said in a low voice, but people really despised that cauldron. People didn't fight for it because it wasn't an attractive object. Everybody remained silent. The atmosphere was a bit cold. That cauldron seems pretty nice. I think it's worth getting. It's a real antique. I will give 2,000 for it, said Lin Feng, sounding cold and detached. At that moment, it was the first object which he found interesting. On that cauldron, 9 dragons were surprisingly engraved. It had been in Celestial River for hundreds of thousands of years but had been lost. In the memories Lin Feng received from the cultivator of the Zun-Qi layer, there was a story about 10 cauldrons in the continent of the 9 clouds. Within these 10 cauldrons, the cauldron with the 9 dragon heads was ranked 9th. It had been missing for hundreds of thousands of years and Lin Feng could recognize it thanks to its patterns. However, nobody seemed to know about it. That object was extremely valuable but nobody knew about it. Lin Feng had almost immediately bid 10,000 for it, but he didn't dare raise it so much because people would have found it suspicious. That old man looked at Lin Feng and Lin Feng slightly nodded and smiled, looking calm and serene. He tried not to look surprised. Since the young man likes it, I will give it to him for 2,000 purity stones of medium quality, which is already a high price, the old man said, which made the entire crowd nod slowly. Nobody wanted to keep bidding. Moron, joked Bing Yuan, but Lin Feng decided to ignore him. It was a cauldron with 9 dragon heads engraved and Lin Feng was getting it for 2,000 purity stones of medium quality. Lin Feng didn't care about being called a moron 100 times over. Nobody is bidding anymore, asked Lan Jiao to the crowd. As expected, nobody spoke. Lan Jiao didn't continue anymore either. After all, she already thought that 2,000 purity stones of medium quality was a lot for that cauldron. It wasn't worth it. Congratulations to the young man for winning the cauldron, said Lan Jiao to Lin Feng while slightly bowing. Her soft and white breasts looked even bigger as she bowed down, which drew everybody's attention. After taking the cauldron with the 9 dragon heads away, an enchanting smile appeared on Lan Jiao's face and she said, the last thing is the essence fire of a Qian-level beast, the 7-tailed fox. I am convinced that I don't need to say much about the price. Essence fire. Lin Feng was stupefied. That was from a beast of the Qian level. A cultivator of the Qian-Qi layer could use pure qi, and if they had a fire-based spirit, absorbing that essence fire, their attacks would be enhanced. Ferocious beasts were similar to cultivators in the fact that they condensed pure qi. The 7-tailed fox was a fire beast. Its essence fire was extremely strong. It could absorb pure qi and condense it into essence fire. It could increase its power that way. When Lan Jiao put it down, the crowd went insane. The essence fire of a 7-tailed fox was a treasure. In terms of ferocious beasts, it was an extremely powerful one. For fire cultivators as well as cultivators who concocted pills, that beast was very tempting. The starting price is 2,000 purity stones of medium quality, said Lan Jiao. It was more expensive than the moon-breaking blade or the ancient cauldron. It was starting at 2,000. Besides, everybody was bidding. Nobody thought that the price was too high. 3,000. 4,000. 10,000. Everybody kept bidding, the price had reached 10,000 in a very short time and the scariest part was that it didn't stop increasing. 20,000, said an ice-cold voice. At that moment, everybody was stupefied. 20,000, someone had increased the bid from 10,000 straight to 20,000, and that person was Bing Yuan. Chapter 275, The Apple of His Eye. 20,000 purity stones of medium quality, how wealthy. Besides, Lan Yu was very wealthy too, thought Lin Feng when he heard them. The Ice and Snow Mountain Village and the Haoyu sect were much wealthier than the Yunhai sect used to be. Besides, Bing Yuan had raised the bid from 10,000 immediately up to 20,000. He obviously was very interested in the fire essence from that beast. The auction room was silent for a moment and then Lan Yu said, while smiling coldly, 21,000. The crowd was stupefied. A moment ago, Bing Yuan had forced the price up, so Lan Yu, at that moment, was wanted to get his revenge. Lan Yu, you already purchased the moonbreaking blade, you still have 21,000 purity stones, said Bing Yuan coldly while frowning. Lan Yu had already spent 12,000 for the blade. Try and continue, you'll see if I have the purity stones, said Lan Yu while laughing indifferently. Bing Yuan didn't dare gamble. Idiot, joked Lin Feng, who was sitting at the same place as before. Bing Yuan had immediately raised to 20,000, everybody knew that he was extremely interested. Which is why Lan Yu was playing with him like that. Bing Yuan is really an idiot. Many people had the same thought as Lin Feng. Since he really wanted to have that object and had, a moment before, provoked Lan Yu getting his revenge was a logical course of events. 22,000, said Bing Yuan coldly. 23,000, replied Lan Yu sounding carefree. 25,000, said Bing Yuan looking glum. The price is still too low. At that moment, Lin Feng suddenly said, 26,000 purity stones of medium quality. 30,000, said Bing Yuan. A wave of coldness, coming from the reserved area, rolled in the atmosphere making many people shake from head to toe. Bing Yuan was furious. For 30,000, you can have it, said Lan Yu while smiling indifferently. He finally stopped there. Besides, Bing Yuan seemed to be furious, he didn't look happy. 30,000 purity stones of medium quality was everything that he had. If Lin Feng had raised again, Bing Yuan would have been unable to continue. I also wanted it, said Lin Feng while smiling lightly. Lin Feng knew that he had to stop raising because if Bing Yuan hadn't been able to raise anymore, it wouldn't have been amusing at all for Lin Feng. Finally, Bing Yuan had obtained the seven-tailed fox's essence fire for 30,000 purity stones of medium quality. Alright, this is the end of the auction. Everybody can come pick up their treasures, said Lan Jiao while smiling. Immediately after, she left the stage. People who had won bids stood up one after the other and walked towards the area behind the stage. Lin Feng stood up as well and looked outside of the broken window of his booth. An extremely cold chi rose in the atmosphere. Bing Yuan was running past Lin Feng. When they passed, a terrifyingly cold energy moved towards Lin Feng. It was extremely cold. But he didn't stop there, he immediately moved towards the back of the auction. Even though he had spent 30,000 purity stones of medium quality, he was able to get the essence fire, he would be able to fuse it with his ice. At the Ice and Snow Mountain Village. They had secret techniques to leave the Ling Qi layer and break through to the Xian Qi layer, all of this would therefore be worth it. A sharp and piercing blade Qi emitting a cold aura descended from the sky. Lin Feng's booth exploded, he could see everything very distinctly in Lan Yu's booth. Everything between them had been destroyed by Lan Yu. You're good, said Lan Yu sounding cold and detached. He then jumped and landed farther away. Besides, one of the disciples of the Haoyu sect laughed coldly while staring at Lin Feng and the two others. You're dead, said someone in a low voice mockingly. Lin Feng was definitely going to die. But in the auction room, they weren't going to attack, they wouldn't be allowed. However, immediately after leaving the pavilion, Lin Feng would definitely die. Are you looking at me, joked Lin Feng. The four people were staring at Lin Feng and remained silent without expressing clearly what they meant. Lin Feng jumped in the air and landed on the stage. He immediately moved towards the back. The one who had made the best transaction was Lin Feng. He had obtained the ancient cauldron, nobody knew what it was and he had gotten it for only 2,000 purity stones. How could he not be excited to collect it? The 10 people were receiving their respective goods. When Lin Feng's turn arrived, Lan Jiao slightly smiled to him and said, Sir, you don't need to give any purity stones, tomorrow when you pass by to receive your purity stones, we'll just subtract the sum. Alright, said Lin Feng while nodding. He looked at the cauldron which was being brought to him. Sir, the ancient cauldron is yours, said Lan Jiao while smiling. Lin Feng caressed the cauldron and a cold sensation invaded his hands. Lin Feng could distinctly sense the ancient qi of the object. His body flickered and the cauldron disappeared. Lan Jiao looked at Lin Feng while smiling and said, May Lan Jiao know your name, sir? Lin Feng, said Lin Feng while nodding and smiling at Lan Jiao. People took their respective items and left. Lin Feng, whispered Lan Jiao while looking at Lin Feng and the rest leave. She then whispered again, check him out. Jiao Jiao, there is no need to check him out, said a silhouette in the corner of the room. It was a middle-aged woman. She had beautiful flowing hair. She looked gorgeous, alluring and morally elevated. Madame Yun knows him, asked Lan Jiao while looking at the middle-aged woman. He set a city on fire and exterminated hundreds of thousands of MOU troops, which completely reversed the course of the war. Then, he saved the princess. Later, he galloped into the imperial city and saved Lu Xonglun. Then he killed a young noble and became a marquis. Lin Feng's name is already illustrious. How could I not know him, said the middle-aged woman while smiling. She had a strange feeling though because Lin Feng had been quiet for 6 months and had suddenly appeared in Celestial River. How powerful, said Lan Zhao startled. Lin Feng and she were about the same age, he was about 17 or 18 years old and had accomplished so many things already. Zhao Zhao, he is still single, he hasn't married yet, said the middle-aged woman with a smile yet not a smile on her face. Lan Zhao was surprised, smiled and said, Madam Yun, you're making fun of me again. Why? Zhao Zhao, heroes marry beautiful women. I think that you and him would be a perfect couple. If you manage to make it join us, that would be a wonderful thing, said Madame Yun to Lan Zhao. Lan Zhao, however, was shaking her head and smiling, her facial expression was strange. Lin Feng left the auction. At that moment, some silhouettes were closely following him but Lin Feng seemed like he hadn't noticed. He was secretly smiling coldly. He wasn't neither rushing nor walking slowly, he left the pavilion and walked in the direction of the restaurant. Lin Feng, brother, why do you need to leave so fast? You and me still need to talk, said a voice coming from behind. Then, an extremely cold Qi moved straight towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng couldn't help but stop. I'm sorry, I fear that I'm going to have to disappoint you. I have no time to waste with you, said Lin Feng sounding cold and detached. He then continued walking. But at that moment, in front of Lin Feng, there was a person with their arms folded across their chest. That person said in a low voice, why do you need to hurry? In the distance, people who were coming out of the dream pavilion and looking at the scene. As expected, once they had left the dream pavilion, Bing Yuan and Lang Yu were impatiently waiting for him. How could they forgive Lin Feng for his provocations? Brother, Lang Yu, let's put our disagreements aside for the time being, how does that sound, said Bing Yuan to the Blade Master, Lang Yu, who nodded and said, alright. But there are 3 of them and we are 2, what should we do? It's easy, we attack him together and see who kills him first. Then, we kill the 2 others one-on-one. Alright, but I want that girl, agreed Lang Yu. No problem. That girl seems quite good. You can do whatever you wish with her, said Bing Yuan while smiling evilly. Bing Yuan and Lang Yu's words were echoing one another. In the distance, people were shaking their heads. These 2 people regarded Lin Feng as a toy and they were openly talking about how they were going to kill him in his presence. Lin Feng shouldn't have provoked these 2 influential young men. Bing Yuan was the best disciple of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village and Lang Yu was a prodigy of the Hao Yu sect, the Blade Master. These people were not ordinary people at all. Lin Feng had provoked them, he was going to die for that. However, at that moment, the crowd didn't notice that in Lin Feng's eyes, an ice-cold killing intent appeared, his face was filled with murder. These 2 people had surprisingly dared speak about Meng Qing with obscenities. Meng Qing was the apple of Lin Feng's eye and nobody was allowed to touch or aggress her, otherwise they would die. Chapter 276, The Genius? Lin Feng's cold energy didn't make Lang Yu hesitate at all, instead he was evilly and viciously staring at Meng Qing, his eyes were sharp as a blade, he then said, come on. When he finished talking, Lang Yu took small steps towards Lin Feng, though his steps were small, he was still extremely quick, just like a whirlwind. Some dust rose from the ground, immediately after, some blade energy reached the dust. Each time Lang Yu took a small step, the blade energy in the air became more dense. Besides in the blink of an eye, he had made a dozen steps and his blade energy had reached its climax, it was extremely sharp. When he released it, it emitted an ear-piercing whistling sound. At the same time, Bing Yuan was attacking as well. Snow and frost were falling from the sky. A layer of ice invaded the entire atmosphere, it was extremely cold, to the extent that everybody was shaking. How powerful! The crowd in the distance was astonished. Lang Yu the Blade Master was as sharp as his blade. Bing Yuan, of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, had already managed to deeply freeze the entire atmosphere. Under his skills, the ground had become ice and snow. These 2 people were extremely strong, they definitely were some of the most outstanding junior cultivators of their generation. They were real geniuses. When that blade descends, he will definitely cut into 2 pieces. Said the disciples of the Hao Yu sect arrogantly. Lang Yu, when battling, rarely had to strike more than once. Lin Feng wouldn't even withstand a single attack. He would immediately be killed. Lin Feng, you will freeze to death. Your blood vessels will freeze until you die. Said the disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village. Lin Feng was too arrogant, he had dared kill one of the disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, besides, he had also dared to provoke Bing Yuan. He wanted to die. They couldn't wait to see how Lin Feng intended to dodge Bing Yuan's attacks. Many people were convinced that Lin Feng was going to die. He was an obscure and unknown person. How could he rival with the Blade Master and Bing Yuan? The real question was who would be the first to kill Lin Feng. Lin Feng, when he sensed the sharp blade and the ice energy, still looked calm and serene. He looked so calm that his face was completely still. However, his eyes were filled with coldness and murderous intentions. Slash, shouted Lang Yu while blade energy started descending. Immediately after he said the word slash, a sharp energy moved towards Lin Feng and enveloped him. A bright and resplendent blade light emerged, and like lightning, descended from the sky towards Lin Feng. Die. At that moment, Bing Yuan also attacked, he had just released an incredible quantity of ice chi which was enveloping Lin Feng's body, as if it was corroding Lin Feng's skin. It seemed like Lin Feng was going to freeze to death. At the same time, an ice fist was moving towards Lin Feng as well, bombarding through the atmosphere, it was ice cold and brutal. Die! Shouted Lin Feng very distinctly while slightly raising his head. Die, die, die! Was echoing in the atmosphere and far away into the distance. An incredible deadly chi invaded the atmosphere as if it could slaughter everyone. That incredibly sharp deadly chi astonished Long Yu and Bing Yuan. Their hearts started pounding. Their blade and ice attacks seemed very weak in comparison. The force and chi of their attacks was much weaker than what Lin Feng was releasing. Lin Feng threw himself at Bing Yuan like a sword. Then, a pallid sword light flashed for a brief moment. Bing Yuan's heart was brutally and violently pounding, and immediately after, it stopped. At the same time, Long Yu's resplendent blade also fell through the air. Slash! A slight sound emerged in the air. Bing Yuan's body had been cut into 2 pieces and blood was gushing everywhere. Blood was everywhere. Long Yu's blade had cut Bing Yuan's body into 2 pieces down the middle. The ground had exploded beneath him. The 2 halves of Bing Yuan's body flew in opposite directions from the explosion. The atmosphere suddenly became absolutely silent. The crowd looked terrified. They were staring at Bing Yuan's corpse. He died. Bing Yuan was cut into 2 by Long Yu's blade? The crowd looked absolutely dumbstruck as if they couldn't believe their eyes, especially the disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village. Bing Yuan was the best disciple of the mountain village. He had broken through to the 9th chi layer, and he had died like that? One attack had been enough to cut him in 2? Besides, he had been killed by Lang Yu. It couldn't be true, it had to be a dream. An extremely strong junior cultivator had been killed in a flash. You killed Bing Yuan? Said the people of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village while furiously staring at Lang Yu. Idiot, didn't you see that Lin Feng killed him before my attack even hit? Do you really think it was me that killed him? If I had, he wouldn't have died with only 1 strike. Said Lang Yu while furious. At that moment, his facial expression was hideous. He was staring at Lin Feng. That guy had needed only 1 strike to kill Bing Yuan and forced him to cut Bing Yuan in half with his attack. If Lang Yu killed the others, he wouldn't need to justify himself, but this time he had killed a genius of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village. If there was no explanation, maybe there would be a serious conflict between the 2 big sections. The consequences would be disastrous. Killed by Lin Feng? The people of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village were looking at Lin Feng. You dare attack Bing Yuan by surprise? Said one of them. Immediately after, they all looked disgusted by Lin Feng. Attacked him by surprise? Lin Feng was stupefied. Immediately after, he shook his head and said, "You're all retarded as well as blind." A moment before, Bing Yuan had attacked him, and even if Lin Feng had parried, why say that he had attacked him by surprise? Bing Yuan was attacking him and Lin Feng wanted to strike back. They called that a surprise attack. You all want to die. Said Lin Feng when he saw them all starting to walk towards him. He released deadly chi. When the disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village sensed the dense deadly chi, their hearts started pounding brutally. That deadly chi was extremely brutal, it was swift and fierce. It doesn't look good. Said the disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village. They had an ominous presentiment. At that moment, they saw a purple energy emerge from Lin Feng's body and move towards them. What's this? Thought the people in the crowd, shocked. That purple energy was floating in the air like a snake towards them. All the people of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village were terrified and panic-stricken. However, that long purple thread of energy turned into a dragon. In a flash, it enveloped and swallowed their bodies as they tried to approach Lin Feng. Ah! Some horrible shrieks spread in the air. The long purple dragon was holding them so tightly that it was painful. Their bodies felt like they were melting. Its body completely covered them as if they would be forced to drown inside it. A short moment later, the purple river-like silhouette returned to Lin Feng. At that moment, the disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village had already disappeared. They had completely melted and nothing was remaining of their bodies. How terrifying! What kind of spirit is that? It's monstrous. The hearts of the people in the crowd were brutally pounding. All the disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, including Bing Yuan, had died. Bing Yuan had been cut into 2 and the others had been swallowed by a monstrous dragon to the extent that nothing was left. Everything that was happening was too shocking. They wanted to kill Lin Feng? Besides, Bing Yuan and the Blade Master, Lang Yu, had cooperated, but that had only lasted for a very short moment. Bing Yuan had died and therefore, the other disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village had intervened. They thought that they were going to kill Lin Feng with numbers, and in the end, he was still standing there in the same place. A long purple dragon had emerged from his body and swallowed them like an evil spirit. The crowd was just realizing that if Lin Feng had dared to provoke both Bing Yuan and Lang Yu, it was because he was indeed extremely powerful. He was much stronger than Bing Yuan. He's a genius, he's much scarier than Bing Yuan. Thought the people in the crowd. At that moment, they were looking at Lang Yu. At that moment, Lang Yu was staring at Lin Feng. He looked perplexed. He looked as sharp as before, but he already didn't look as aggressive. That blade hadn't touched Lin Feng, not even slightly, and because of Lin Feng, he had ended up cutting Bing Yuan's body into 2 pieces. Lin Feng's power was, indeed, terrifying. Extremely arrogant yet can't withstand a single attack, such a worthless person. Said Lin Feng in an ice-cold way while looking at Bing Yuan's corpse. Immediately after, he turned around slowly and looked at Lang Yu. Lin Feng was smiling coldly. Are you the same, Blade Master? Do you think that you can bully everyone with only your current strength? There is a vast ocean of cultivators who are stronger than you. The Blade Master looked glum, his facial expression was hideous, but he had no way to contradict Lin Feng. He was just blankly staring at him. Lin Feng was extremely strong, Long Yu had to be careful. You threatened us with your blade previously because of a simple sentence? What gives you the right to use a blade in front of me? Lin Feng took a step and sword energy whistled through the air. Sword chi and force was falling from the sky in the form of a hurricane rushing towards Long Yu. It seemed like 10,000 swords were attacking at the same time. It was terrifying. That sword force was even more brutal than Long Yu's blade force, and sharper as well. The sword was the emperor of all weapons. Chapter 277, Kill as he wishes? What a strong sword chi and force. What a cruel man. The hearts of the people in the crowd were pounding. Besides, the 4 disciples of the Haoyu sect were dumbstruck. In the Celestial Mountain restaurant, they had provoked Lin Feng. Lang Yu had even been extremely aggressive to them. He had immediately threatened them with a blade and attacked the banister next to Lin Feng. Lin Feng had, however, remained silent and incomparably calm. They had thought that he was a timid coward, a weakling, but at that moment, the force and chi which Lin Feng had just released proved to them that if Lin Feng didn't attack them before, it wasn't because he was scared, it was just because they were not fit to be his opponents. When Lang Yu sensed the incomparably sharp energy, he frowned. At that moment, Lin Feng had shown to everybody that he was stronger than Lang Yu. Maybe the real Lin Feng had finally shown himself. However, blade cultivators were sharp, aggressive, and had an indomitable will. With their blades, they could annihilate everything. Even if his opponent was extremely strong, Lang Yu remained fearless, he wasn't flinching at all. He was able to condense blade chi. He loved blades, understood blades, grasped how they worked, his nickname, the Blade Master, wasn't just a rumor. Even though he was insufferably arrogant and thought he was the best in the world, he was still a genius. A light flashed, it was the light of the moon-breaking blade. Its light was bright, clear, and piercingly cold. It's a Ling-level weapon, the moon-breaking blade. Lang Yu is surprisingly using his new weapon against that guy. How come we've never heard of him before? Fought many people. At that moment, Lang Yu wasn't hesitating, his body like a sharp blade, he became one with his blade. I recognize that I underestimated you, but you are still very far from being as strong as me, said the Blade Master while holding the moon-breaking blade. Lang Yu still thought he was the best and youngest genius in the world, but as before, he remained vigilant in front of Lin Feng. I, Lang Yu, started practicing blade cultivation when I was 5 years old. At the Haoyu sect, there aren't any strong blade skills. I created everything on my own. I understood how to use blade force and how to use energy attacks, I did all of this in the last year. I defeated many of my fellow disciples at the Haoyu sect. That's how I became who I am today. I taught myself a skill called Lonely Shadow. You can die under my created blade attack. I'm proud of it, said Lang Yu. He was speaking slowly. He considered everything and everyone beneath his attention. When the crowd heard him, they were all secretly nodding. Lang Yu was really a genius. He taught himself blade skills and could use energy attacks. He was extremely strong and powerful. Maybe Lin Feng was weaker than him. You don't understand blades. Your talent is that of a mediocre person, said Lin Feng while smiling coldly, and then continued, you cannot rival me. Just like you, I've taught myself sword skills and I have only been practicing for a year. Come and have a try. 1 year? The crowd was stupefied. Lin Feng had been practicing sword skills for only a year? Was it possible to become that strong within a year? Besides, Lin Feng was saying that Lang Yu didn't understand blades, that he was a mediocre cultivator. If he was a mediocre cultivator, what were the people in the crowd? It hurt the pride of many of these people. Alright, remember, the name of my attack that will take your life is Lonely Shadow, said Lang Yu slowly. Then he jumped and didn't release any blade force. Instead, he used his blade to carry out an energy attack. Lonely Shadow, he said in a low voice. A light appeared and invaded the atmosphere as if it had no limit. That was a blade energy attack. That blade was like a person who didn't know which direction to attack from, so it appeared in every direction. Energy attacks, when using a blade, seemed like there were thousands of blades even though there was only one. That shadow-like attack was unfathomable and enigmatic. It seemed like it chased its opponent. Besides, if it touched anyone, nobody would be able to resist the power. Before, Lang Yu required only one attack to kill opponents of the same level as him, even if they were people of the 9th Ling Chi layer, he could easily kill them. That Lonely Shadow was astonishing. Nobody had ever survived such an energy attack, and at that moment, it would be especially complicated since Lang Yu was carrying it out using a spiritual weapon of higher quality, his precious treasure, the moon-breaking blade. Lin Feng, you will definitely die. That blade attack is unfathomable. The Blade Master really deserves the moon-breaking blade. Bing Yuan was much weaker than him. When the crowd saw that blade, they were astonished. They gradually understood why, when the Blade Master used his blade, people would die. His Lonely Shadow attack fell from the air. The crowd had the impression that Lin Feng was already cut in two in front of them. A tearing sound spread in the air which made the crowd narrow their eyes. What's going on? The hearts of the people in the crowd were pounding. The moon-breaking blade was descending from the air, like a lonely shadow. However, Lin Feng was patiently waiting in his initial position. In front of him, there was a sword. It was an ordinary sword, however, a blade was pressed against it, the blade was unable to move further. That majestic moon-breaking blade had been stopped by an ordinary sword. How's that possible? The crowd was fixedly staring at the ordinary sword. It couldn't look more ordinary than it did, but it had blocked the powerful blade. Nobody knew how Lin Feng had done that. I told you, you don't understand blades. Calmly said Lin Feng. He was looking at Lin Yu, who looked astonished, he couldn't believe it. Then, the sword slowly moved back, it started emitting a bright and resplendent light. It was dazzling to the eyes. What a brilliant sword! Energy attack. Lin Yu's heart was pounding. He used his blade to carry out an energy attack again, to block the sword in front of him, and at that moment a metallic sound spread in the atmosphere. The moon-breaking blade was blown away and immediately blood was projected into the air. Lin Yu's body was violently pushed backwards. If he hadn't used his blade energy attack, the dazzling sword would have killed him. Lin Feng suddenly raised his hand and caught the flying moon-breaking blade. He then immediately shouted, "Ba Dao!" Ba Dao was stupefied. Lin Feng threw the moon-breaking blade to him. His eyes were excited behind his mask. Lin Feng had, as expected, remembered his promise. He had taken the moon-breaking blade and given it to Ba Dao. Even though it was stolen, it didn't matter. Lin Feng had anticipated that Lin Yu would attack him, he knew that even if he didn't get the moon-breaking blade at the auction, sooner or later, the blade would be Ba Dao's blade. Lin Yu lowered his head. There was a long blood trail from his arm which was almost cut off. He was stupefied. He hadn't even had one occasion to strike Lin Feng with his blade. Lin Feng had remained calm and relaxed and had easily blocked all of his attacks. Lin Feng was right, Lin Yu didn't understand blades. He definitely had natural talent, but it was still comparable to that of mediocre people. I taught myself how to use my blade when I was 5 and he has only been using a sword for a year and he's already able to defeat me. Why the hell was I so proud? Where did my arrogance come from? Lin Yu asked himself. He regretted having the reputation of a genius at that moment. I was so proud of my lonely shadow, but he blocked it so easily, maybe I really don't understand blades. Lin Yu's heart was filled with sadness. He felt completely dispirited, Lin Feng destroyed his arrogance. When Lin Feng noticed that Lin Yu was regretting, Lin Feng smiled coldly. Those who dared to humiliate Meng Cheng had to die. Die. Lin Feng took a step, an infinite quantity of sword chi invaded the atmosphere. People's hearts were pounding. Lin Yu was going to get killed by Lin Feng? Was another genius going to take his last breath? Lin Feng's sword was dazzling. At that moment, Lin Yu was absolutely hopeless and dispirited, it seemed like he had given up. He didn't have his fighting spirit anymore. He was just looking at Lin Feng's sword, piercing the atmosphere. There was a mountain of thoughts in his head, he didn't understand what was happening. He had been training hard for 10 years. Get lost. At that moment, a shadow appeared in the distance behind Lin Yu. It looked like a swift and fierce blade shadow. It immediately moved towards Lin Feng. That person was like a blade and their energy was boundless. Slash. Lin Feng's sword descended from the air. An explosion filled the air. A crevice appeared in the ground. Lin Feng groaned. That extremely swift and fierce blade had reached him, which violently knocked him backwards. The blade is a weapon for strong cultivators. Losing and winning is something that depends on fate. In any case, there is always a cultivator who is stronger than you in this world. Said an extremely loud and mighty voice which filled the sky, then it continued, Lin Yu, no need to be discouraged. I won't kill him so you can kill him as you wish, with your blade. After that, 2 silhouettes started to rush into the sky. People's hearts were trembling. There was a cultivator of the Xianqi layer amongst them. He had stopped Lin Feng to help Lin Yu. He said that he wasn't killing Lin Feng to let Lin Yu do that himself. He was sparing Lin Feng on purpose. Lin Feng, you're very lucky. Thought the people in the crowd. But at that moment, the ground started shaking insanely. A white silhouette, which looked like a celestial being, was attacking. In a flash, her silhouette moved towards a distant point. She released an incredible coldness which was freezing people's hearts and thoughts. The only thing left in the area seemed to be coldness. Die! Shouted the ice-cold voice. In the atmosphere, some ice transformed into a white arrow which rushed towards the figure in the distance. The silhouette in the horizon flickered, their pace accelerated, that blade shadow looked like a shooting star. However, that white arrow was still moving straight towards the silhouette at a much faster speed. Then, that silhouette groaned and blood splashed through the air. Such a move had made the words that they just spoke sound like a joke. If Lin Feng wanted to kill, he could kill as he pleased? Chapter 278, The Night Visit. It's a cultivator of the Xianqi layer. When the crowd saw that white silhouette, who had suddenly appeared, they were stupefied. She attacked and the ice from her attack was shot across hundreds of kilometers. Her speed was also much more incredible than that of the blade shadow. After her attack, blood filled the air. That silent woman, who was always by Lin Feng's side, was actually a strong cultivator. Besides, Bing Yuan and Lin Yu had dared to humiliate her, they wanted to die. If Lin Yu managed to leave alive, that would be a strike of luck. No matter if it was Lin Feng or Meng Cheng, they could both easily kill Lin Yu. Who's that person who came to save Lin Yu? He's also a blade user, how surprising. Thought the crowd looking at them from a distance. They didn't know if he was also a strong cultivator of the Hao sect. Why wasn't he showing himself? Why was he hiding his identity? Why was he afraid of showing his true colors? Besides, he had come to save Lang Yu and hadn't even stopped for 1 second. Lin Feng gazed into the distance, he was thinking. That person was a cultivator of the Xian Qi layer and was, just like Lang Yu, a blade cultivator. His blade abilities were extremely advanced. Was he Lang Yu's teacher? Genius of the Hao sect, it would be best for you to not cross my path again. Thought Lin Feng coldly. He then immediately moved towards Bing Yuan's corpse and looked for a ring with a Na stone. That guy had obtained the essence fire of the seven-tailed fox, it couldn't have gone far, he probably had a Na stone to store his items. Besides, the purity stones he had couldn't have come from nowhere. Since Lin Feng had killed him, he had to take his Na stone, otherwise, wouldn't it just be wasted? Lin Feng took the ring from Bing Yuan's finger, blood dripped on the ring, in a flash, information entered Lin Feng's consciousness. A cold qi dispersed into the air, that was Bing Yuan's remaining qi inside the ring. The essence fire of the seven-tailed fox was inside. Besides, there were a few skills and a few purity stones. Lin Feng wasn't interested in these little things, he just wanted the Xian level essence fire, it was extremely valuable. Bing Yuan had spent an enormous amount of money to buy it but now, it belonged to Lin Feng. Besides, coupled with his ancient cauldron and the moon-breaking blade which he had stolen from Lang Yu, Lin Feng had managed to take the top 3 items of the auction. Celestial River is abundant in treasures. Lin Feng laughed. On his first day at Celestial River, he had found some spiritual herbs and obtained 3 new treasures. He was particularly happy about the ancient dragon cauldron which was one of the 10 great cauldrons. Lin Feng felt very lucky. Even though the cauldron didn't seem to be in good shape, except for the carvings which looked alive, it still couldn't be an ordinary object, it was an item shrouded in mystery and secrets. Unfortunately, these 10 ancient cauldrons were too old and Lin Feng didn't know where to find information about them. He didn't know how to use the dragon cauldron either. In the middle of a calm and peaceful night, in a hotel, Lin Feng was in his room, sitting cross-legged on the edge of the bed. He wasn't sleeping, instead, he was investigating his memories as this was his best resource for information. All the memories which had been transmitted to Lin Feng by the cultivator of the Zun Qi layer, no matter if they concerned pill concoction or weapon fabrication, were all priceless. They could never be exchanged for something material. The strong cultivator had given a priceless treasure to Lin Feng. At that moment, some footsteps broke the silence which made Lin Feng's closed eyes oscillate. Immediately after, he opened his eyes. Someone knocked at the door. Lin Feng said, sounding indifferent, "Come in." The door opened itself and a beautiful woman appeared at the door, however, it wasn't Meng Qing at all. Besides, Lin Feng had seen that woman during the day, it was Lan Jiao, the alluring young woman. Even though it was the middle of the night, Lan Jiao was still wearing extremely revealing clothing. At that moment, she had already changed her clothes and put on a fire-red dress. Her snowy white shoulders were still uncovered. Her large chest was still partially revealed, the sight was unbearable, it would drive a man crazy with desire. She's such a seductress, an extraordinarily beautiful woman. Thought Lin Feng when he saw her figure. He looked a bit surprised though, it was the middle of the night, what did Lan Jiao want? Besides, she was wearing such revealing clothes, wasn't she scared for her safety? "Mr. Lin, can I come in?" asked Lan Jiao still waiting at the entrance while smiling. She had such clear and beautiful eyes, they were enchanting. It seemed like she could steal a man's soul. Lin Feng remained silent for a second and then slightly nodded while saying, "Come in." When Lan Jiao heard him, she entered the room and, without asking Lin Feng's permission, immediately sat down. She smiled at Lin Feng and said, "Mr. Lin, I'm so sorry for bothering you in the middle of the night." Lin Feng slightly shook his head and said, "Miss, what can I help you with?" "Am I not allowed to come and visit Mr. Lin without needing something?" said Lan Jiao straightforwardly. She was casting flirtatious glances at Lin Feng and her voice was filled with temptation. "Miss Lan Jiao, you came to my room in the middle of the night, this is not the best moment to visit me, things cannot be that simple," said Lin Feng smiling. Lan Jiao was visiting Lin Feng in the middle of the night, was she spying on him? She definitely had ulterior motives. Therefore, Lin Feng's voice also somewhat conveyed sarcasm. "Mr. Lin is insensitive and lacks passion," said Lan Jiao while smiling. She was still staring at Lin Feng in a seducing and alluring way as if she hoped that Lin Feng's heart would eventually melt. But what Lan Jiao didn't know was that Lin Feng could control himself much more than ordinary people when it came to beautiful women. "If I was passionate, I am afraid that you wouldn't be feeling safe right now," said Lin Feng while glancing at her partially revealed chest. His heart was pounding, he was filled with desire. If Lin Feng had a little less willpower and determination, something would definitely get the better of him. "If Mr. Lin feels like being passionate, I don't mind it," said Lan Jiao while smiling. She stood up and walked towards Lin Feng. When she arrived in front of him, all he could see was her white chest. Lan Jiao was doing that on purpose, and it was surprisingly turning him on. Lin Feng didn't know what her motive was though. "Since you are vigorously expressing your desire for you to be passionate, I will be passionate," said Lin Feng who stood up. He walked towards Lan Jiao which stupefied her. She couldn't help but take a tiny step backwards which made Lin Feng smile. "Miss Lan, you are seducing me but you are scared of what I might do, why is that?" said Lin Feng sounding indifferent and then continued, "Miss Lan, what is your real purpose for coming here?" Lan Jiao was stupefied. Her facial expression was strange. Lin Feng was surprisingly turning a blind eye to her seduction. Could it be that she wasn't seducing enough for him? If you are wondering where Lin Feng's secret powers of seduction come from, look no further. Chapter 279, Enchanting and Bewitching. Why do you think that I necessarily have a hidden reason for coming to visit you? When Lan Zhao heard Lin Feng, her eyes turned wet and she had a pitiful expression. She took a tiny step forward. Only a few inches were separating her and Lin Feng. Besides, when did I say that I was scared of what you would do? If you like my body, you can have it. Her voice, which was gradually becoming softer and softer, she sounded shy yet was filled with endless temptation. Lin Feng was observing Lan Zhao. She lowered her head and looked extremely shy, her cheeks turned entirely red. Her dress slowly slid along her shoulders. Her snowy white breasts were becoming more and more revealed. Lin Feng was absolutely captivated by the view. He was staring at her dress which was sliding down her shoulders. Only a tiny bit more and he would discover what was under her dress. Do you want to see? Asked Lan Zhao sounding extremely seductive. Lin Feng's heart was like a horse galloping at full speed. He then said, I do. When Lin Feng said that, Lan Zhao's dress had finally started to fall. It slowly slid down her body until it softly landed on the floor. Her plentiful bosom was revealed before Lin Feng's eyes. They were soft and snowy white, they almost looked unreal. Lin Feng wanted to stretch out his hand and gently caress her voluptuous bosom. That thought gave birth to endless desires in his heart. Lin Feng's heart, at that moment, was burning evilly. A small flame of desire had turned into an inferno. Do you want me, Master Lin? Her voice was filled with endless seduction and it triggered an explosion in Lin Feng's heart. His heart was filled with a scorching desire. He was unable to free himself from the endless desire, after all, he was still a young man. Apart from Duan Xin Yi, he had never seen the naked body of another woman. He had also never had so much temptation before him, he had the impression that he was going insane. At that moment, Lin Feng's face was entirely red, he slowly raised his hands and moved them towards her plentiful bosom. I can't. Thought Lin Feng alarmed. His hands were hovering in the air, he was sobering up. There's something wrong, this is not right. She was wearing something under her dress, why would she suddenly be naked right now? Lin Feng could think a little bit more clearly at that moment. He realized that the situation wasn't real. He slightly closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He used earth fusion and started to perceive everything around him. Lin Feng opened his eyes. It seemed like his illusion was slowly dissipating like the moon reflected on a lake. At that moment, Lan Zhao was standing there and smiling. She was still wearing her dress, even though she was wearing very revealing clothing, she still wasn't naked. A moment ago, Lin Feng had a hallucination. What's going on? Lin Feng's pupils shrank. Everything that had just happened was an illusion, but Lin Feng had the impression that it was absolutely real. Mr. Lin, what are you thinking about? Lan Zhao was staring at Lin Feng, she smiled, but her smile was hiding something deeper. Lin Feng was stupefied, he was speechless. He couldn't tell Lan Zhao that, a moment before, he was thinking about caressing her body but it had just been an illusion. A moment ago, I saw an illusion. Said Lin Feng when he saw that Lan Zhao was smiling. He couldn't be fooled. Lin Feng, in the 6 previous months, had been learning how to condense pure qi, how to concoct pills. He had also learnt about the surplus souls technique. He had been drowning himself in the memories of the strong cultivator. He hadn't practiced cultivation to improve his level of strength but his power had already reached the peak of the 8th Ling Qi layer. Besides, he could use the earth fusion and had an iron willpower but he had still been imprisoned in an illusion. Obviously, Lan Zhao had been the one who had used the illusion against him, making his heart abandon itself to desire. That arousing illusion had managed to make him confused. Lan Zhao was extremely strong. She wasn't a simple auctioneer at the Dream Pavilion, it couldn't be that simple. With such strong people, how terrifying was the Dream Pavilion? Miss Lan, even though it was just an illusion, everything I saw was real, it was really your body that I saw. Could it be that you are actually scared of what I might do, which is why you used an illusion? Said Lin Feng surprisingly admitting what he had seen. You're wrong. Said Lan Zhao while smiling. Her seductive eyes were staring at Lin Feng, she then continued, the things that you saw were indeed true, but I just guided the illusion, if you hadn't thought about it and wanted it to go in that direction, it wouldn't have happened that way. Actually, even though the illusion was not real, the things that you saw were real, so you guessed right concerning that part. That had nothing to do with strength, it was just that Lin Feng had been too careless. He hadn't expected to be the victim of an illusion. He didn't even know precisely when the illusion started. Lan Zhao's illusion looked too real, as if illusion and reality had merged together in Lin Feng's mind. So you have displayed your abilities, now tell me why you came. Said Lin Feng sounding indifferent. He had experienced Lan Zhao's power, next time, he wouldn't be fooled and fall into her trap again. The earth fusion was an incredible dimension, he just had to activate it and he would be able to perceive everything around him distinctly. Just like a moment before, when he had come back to reality, however, it wouldn't be so simple against a stronger cultivator. Mr. Lin, since you are so impatient to know, I will tell you immediately. Said Lan Zhao while smiling. She then continued, Mr. Lin, I came to ask you to join us. Join you? At the Dream Pavilion? Lin Feng was surprised. He hadn't anticipated that she would make such an offer. In a way but not just that, there is more than just the Dream Pavilion. said Lan Jiao while smiling. Lin Feng's heartbeat accelerated. More than just the Dream Pavilion? What Lan Jiao was probably trying to tell him was that the Dream Pavilion was only a front for their strength, nothing more. I'm sorry, I'm not interested, said Lin Feng, immediately refusing her offer. Lan Jiao's smile became rigid for a second. I'm not done talking. Why do you need to refuse so hastily? Said Lan Jiao while smiling again. She then slowly said, Mr. Lin, if you join us, you will benefit from an infinite amount of cultivation resources, extremely powerful martial skills and agility techniques. You will be able to enjoy all these benefits as much as you wish. Besides, the illusion that you just saw could also become reality. She was trying to seduce him again. Martial skills, agility techniques, cultivation resources. Besides, he would also be able to have her. Everything was very tempting. I'm sorry, I'm not interested, said Lin Feng while smiling yet sounding stricter, leaving no space for doubt, which surprised Lan Jiao. Not interested? Wasn't he interested in obtaining all the powerful agility techniques and martial skills that he wished? Or wasn't he interested in her? Could it be that Lin Feng didn't find her attractive? She felt a bit hopeless. She was giving her best to entice Lin Feng, but it didn't seem to work at all. She hadn't thought that would be a possibility. Lin Feng didn't need martial skills and agility techniques. He had the memories from the cultivator of the Zun Qi layer. In these memories, there were many powerful martial skills and agility techniques to the extent that it even had things like the surplus soul technique. Women, except when it came to seduction, couldn't rival Meng Cheng when it came to purity and beauty. Even Duan Xinyi was much better in comparison to Lan Jiao. Besides, she was also more elegant. Joining them also implied less freedom, and he would need to complete certain tasks. Obviously, that wasn't something that Lin Feng desired, therefore he wasn't even considering the offer. Mr. Lin, do you know who the person was that saved Lung Yu? You shouldn't have provoked them. Your life might be in danger now, said Lan Jiao, sounding like she wasn't about to give up. Are you done talking? Said Lin Feng while staring at Lan Jiao. Because Lin Feng didn't agree even though she was saying such tempting things, she was now trying to scare him. Lan Jiao was stupefied. Lin Feng continued, if you are done talking, just leave. You are a girl and you are in my room. If people noticed, then their rumors would be spread. Maybe you don't care about those rumors, but I do care, said Lin Feng. Lan Jiao was fixedly staring at him. She looked offended. Humph, groaned Lan Jiao. She was furiously glaring at Lin Feng. Then, she left Lin Feng's room. Chapter 280, Searching Everywhere. In the middle of the night, outside of the Celestial Mountain restaurant, some people were walking by. What a seductive lady, how pretty. When they saw Lan Jiao run away from the restaurant, a drunk man walked towards her. Oh, such a beauty, how white. Ha ha ha. That drunk man was staring at Lan Jiao's breasts and looked evilly. Is that so? Do you want to see? Said Lan Jiao while smiling. The drunk man's eyes suddenly became particularly brilliant. He was drooling. I do. The crowd was fixedly staring at Lan Jiao. Well, all of you, look carefully, said Lan Jiao with a bewitching smile on her face. Immediately after, her dress slowly slid down her body, which made them all breathless for a second. They were fixedly staring at these two snowy white breasts. However, a moment after, they stopped seeing her breasts, which they desired so much. Instead, blood splashed through the atmosphere. A few horrible shrieks broke the silence of the night. All those who had been looking at Lan Jiao were dead on the ground. Some people came to see what was happening. There was a wave of cold qi in the atmosphere. It was very cold. People didn't dare look at Lan Jiao anymore though. They wouldn't be able to seduce such an attractive woman. In the distance, a group of white silhouettes were approaching. They were carrying a palanquin. There were 4 people and they were all wearing white clothes. They looked extremely nimble and were extremely quick. These pure and holy white silhouettes seemed like they were flying through the air, which made them look like ghosts or celestial beings. In a flash, they arrived in front of the crowd. However, at that moment, they disappeared and instantly appeared in the distance and then vanished onto the horizon. How fast? The crowd was astonished. They had disappeared in a flash. What about the attractive girl? Said someone surprised. Immediately after, the crowd turned around and looked in Lan Jiao's direction. They were astonished. There was nobody. Lan Jiao surprisingly had disappeared too. And that palanquin? The enigmatic white silhouettes were, as before, on the road, shuttling back and forth. On the palanquin, there was a beautiful middle-aged woman looking at Lan Jiao with a fake smile on her face. She said, why is Jiao Jiao so furious? Aunt Yun, your suggestion was stupid, said Lan Jiao, sounding annoyed. She had a long face. Why? How come? Considering how seductive you are, you didn't manage to tempt him? Asked Aunt Yun while smiling. Aunt Yun, I perfectly know that you were making fun of me. That bastard will see, said Lan Jiao while hitting her fist in the palm of her other hand. Her eyes were filled with hatred. Lin Feng was detestable. She had used her 1,000 evil illusion skill and Lin Feng had remained unaffected. She had even showed him her own body. She felt humiliated. Her face had been slapped. Jiao Jiao, haven't you studied the 1,000 evil illusions? Coupled with your cultivation level and your beauty, how could you lose? Said Aunt Yun. Lan Jiao was stupefied and said, how could I use the 1,000 evil illusions against him? Besides, I said that I had learned that skill, but it was just a joke, nothing more. Don't misunderstand, said Lan Jiao while lowering her head. She didn't dare look at Aunt Yun. She felt ashamed. She didn't seem to be the same woman as when she was facing Lin Feng. At that moment, she looked like a little girl. Is that so? Said Aunt Yun while smiling. Her smile seemed deep and profound. No wonder you were defeated. Lin Feng has set a city on fire, traveled into another country to save the princess. His willpower and determination are tempered like steel. Jiao Jiao, if you had submitted yourself to him directly, I would have despised him. Ha! Lan Jiao was surprised. She had actually really used the 1,000 evil illusions, and on top of that, it was the first time that she used it. However, she had lost, that's why she was furious. The scariest part was Lin Feng's last words. He had said that she didn't care about her reputation, but he did care about his. It made her look cheap and shameless. But Aunt Yun's opinion made sense in a way. If she had submitted herself to Lin Feng, she wouldn't have been so alluring any longer. That is why she had used the 1,000 evil illusions, which was extremely powerful. Lin Feng falling for it was a normal thing. Jiao Jiao, it's been a few days, now that the news is already spreading amongst those at the top, the treasure has come to light, but we don't know anything else, that's all. Wait for a few more days and we will hear. After receiving the treasure, you will not need to stay here anymore. Your training will come to an end. Said Aunt Yun, sounding mysterious. Lan Jiao had been in Celestial River for a long time. Go back? Whispered Lan Jiao. She looked perplexed. On the second day, in the Dream Pavilion, there were still 10 objects to be sold at the auction. One of the things which amazed the crowd the most was a D-level skill. Even though it was lower quality, it was still a D-level skill. They were brutally strong, that wasn't a skill which you could find anywhere. Apart from a large influential group or sect, ordinary people relied on themselves to gain benefits. It was very difficult for them to acquire skills of the D-level and above. In the Dream Pavilion, a D-level skill had appeared, of course it was making the crowd go wild. In the end, it was obtained by someone who spent 10,000 purity stones of medium quality to acquire it. It was a monstrous price. Besides, there were other treasures in that auction sale, a spiritual weapon. It was a spiritual weapon of medium quality. Someone bought it for 10,000 purity stones of medium quality as well. After the end of the auction, Lan Jiao looked at the booth where Lin Feng had been on the day before. At that moment, there was nobody in that broken booth. Lin Feng hadn't come to pick up his purity stones either. Where is Lin Feng? At that moment, an angry voice and loud shout spread through the atmosphere. A silhouette was flying through the air towards the auction room. People in the crowd were immediately moving aside to open the way. Immediately after, that silhouette landed onto the ground and released some deadly chi which astonished the crowd. They were all looking at the entrance of the auction room. They only saw a majestic-looking young man who was bald and there was a black burn on their head. It looked horrible, but nobody dared make fun of them. People who were near him were moving backwards, fearing that he would get furious and kill them. Lin Feng, show yourself! Shouted the man coldly. It seems like Tu Jiu has come for the essence fire. Thought the people in the crowd. On the day before, Lin Feng had killed Bing Yuan and had made Leng Yu move back with one sword strike. His name was already famous in Celestial River, many people knew who he was. Lin Feng was known for all the insane things that he had done. That outstanding young man was the amazing hero who had set a city on fire. No wonder he was that aggressive and had immediately killed Bing Yuan. Besides, he had nearly killed Leng Yu as well. However, even though his name had become famous, it also meant more trouble. Everybody knew that he had stolen the beast essence fire. Besides, he had many enemies in Celestial River. Tu Jiu was one of them. Besides, he particularly liked that fox fire. What scared people as well was that Tu Jiu had a deep background in Celestial River. He didn't fear Lin Feng, even if a cultivator of the Xian Qi layer was with him. Lan Jiao frowned, she saw Tu Jiu and thought, Lin Feng, what will you do this time? Tu Jiu had an influential background, he was extremely strong and was close to a breakthrough into the Xian Qi layer. Bing Yuan and Leng Yu were weaklings in comparison. Bing Yuan had acquired the fox fire, instead of leaving Celestial River, he decided to try and kill Lin Feng, in the end, he had lost his life instead. Lan Jiao returned into the back room of the auction. Anshin then said in a low voice, Jiao Jiao, Lin Feng hasn't come yet to pick up his purity stones. You could deliver them to him. Ah? Lan Jiao was stupefied. Help Lin Feng and bring the purity stones to him? All right. I have the purity stones, let's see how he will receive me. Said Lan Jiao. Jiao Jiao, you cannot violate the rules of the Dream Pavilion. Said Aunt Yun while shaking her head and smiling. Don't worry Aunt Yun, I will just make him undergo some hardships. Said Lan Jiao, who was thinking of a plan to deal with Lin Feng. Her eyes were twinkling. Aunt Yun handed the purity stones to Lan Jiao. Lan Jiao immediately left afterwards. While looking at her vanishing silhouette, Aunt Yun smiled and said, Jiao Jiao, you need someone to set rules for you, otherwise you're too disobedient. Lan Jiao left the auction and headed towards Lin Feng. Tu Jiu had also learnt that Lin Feng wasn't there. He was determined to go to every corner of the city to look for him. He had to obtain that beast's essence fire. Besides, at the same time, in the ice and snow mountain village which was covered with snow, a group of white horses were galloping at full speed towards the mountain, leaving their footprints in the snow. It seemed like they didn't feel cold at all. The best core disciple of the ice and snow mountain village had been killed in Celestial River. That was shocking news for everybody in the village.